Coming to you from his downtown Denver studio, here's the Backstage Jazz Radio Show with your host, Steve Roby.
Welcome, friends at home and friends in the studio. This is Backstage Jazz. I'm Steve Roby. My guest today is Colorado-based jazz guitarist Steve Langemo. We'll discuss his latest album, Up From the Outside, and his upcoming appearance at Dazzle on Friday, November 24th. Welcome to Backstage Jazz, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Glad you could be here. Why don't we start with a brief intro and overview of your musical career?
Well, I started playing guitar at a pretty young age, age 12. And I grew up in a fairly small town in North Dakota, believe it or not, and got hooked on guitar pretty early. Had a great guitar teacher when I was a kid, as you do when you're from North Dakota. I got out of there as quickly as I could.
Okay.
And, and pursued music school. I got a master's degree in jazz guitar, and I lived in Seattle for a little bit.
Nice.
Spent quite a bit of time in the Dayton, Cincinnati area of Ohio, and worked extensively teaching and playing. And then for about the last 12 years, I have lived in Colorado Springs, and I gig throughout the region and teach here.
Nice.
So,
yeah. I'm curious, who were your early influences? I guess guitar players, or maybe not.
It was guitar all the way when I was a kid, because I grew up in the 80s.
Okay.
So when I was a kid, I was just, really taken by, all the rock guitar stuff. So it was Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads and, all these rock bands and metal bands had, one or two killer guitar players. So those were the early, I don't even know if influences would be it, but the inspiration of the music that I desired to play. I did have a fantastic guitar teacher when I was a kid who had a great way of sort of channeling students into doing all these things that, you didn't want to do when you were a kid, but ended up being great for you. So I was learning to read music at an early age and play classical guitar and, appreciate some different styles and stuff. So by the time I, was about 18 and was getting hired to play in bands, it wasn't that rock stuff. It was like blues bands and, maybe some classic rock and funk and stuff. So it deviated from the metal stuff pretty quickly. So,
wow. When did you make the switch to jazz music?
I think it was when I started college and I was hanging out with these a little bit older musicians that I went to school with. And the college that I got my undergrad at had a great music department. They had a great recording studio, and kind of a contemporary music program, but they weren't super heavy on the jazz thing. But I was hanging out with these older guys that were, really into jazz and a lot of like fusion stuff, a lot of like late 80s, early 90s, stuff like Chick Corea, Electric Band, John Scofield, these great, John Scofield records. Alan Holdsworth was a big one. I think that was an early gateway to jazz because, he had a very rock guitar tone and, whammy bar with this really advanced harmonic thing. So that's where I started getting the ear, I think, for jazz.
So in addition to performances, I understand you have a teaching studio in Colorado Springs. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I do. I always pursued teaching as part of being able to make a living doing this crazy thing, which a lot of musicians do. I was teaching guitar lessons at like a local music store when I was probably 18 years old. And, that followed through. I was teaching at a college in Ohio for a while. And when I moved to Colorado, in order to set up my teaching, I started teaching at a couple other studios owned by other people. And that just really showed me out that I shouldn't have a boss to do this. So I'm in about the 11th year of running.
All right.
This is my guitar studio, and I have an office in an office building, so I go to work every day. But I am fortunate that a lot of really cool students find me. I have a lot of advanced students and a lot of adult students and some prodigy kids and stuff. So it's generally very interesting.
That's great. Congratulations. Let's listen to a few tracks from your latest release, Up From the Outside. Who's joining you on the album?
So I've got a drummer named Stefan Flores. He's a Colorado Springs guy. One of the most fantastic drummers I've ever played with. He plays around Denver a lot. His main gig is he plays drums in a blues band called the Delta Sonics.
Oh yeah.
And they're pretty prominent in the area, and they play Dazzle, where I have a show coming up. So that's kind of his main gig, but he's a fantastic jazz drummer. He and I actually go to Europe once in a while in a metal band. So he's extremely well-rounded drummer. So he's on the album. His brother is playing bass, a guy named John Flores. He's fantastic as well on both upright and electric bass. And then a keyboard player named Tony Sajowski, who's a Chicago transplant to Colorado Springs that gigs all over the place with a ton of people.
Great.
And a saxophone player named Keith Walton, who is another Denver-based guy who has his own albums out and does a lot of his own gigs too.
Yeah, I was listening to the album this afternoon. It's really good. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Oh, thank you.
So I've got Dark Matter queued up, ready to go. What can you tell our listeners about this track?
This song kind of sits in a place, sort of harmonically, that I like, which is extremely dark. I guess, there's the name Dark Matter. So the melodies are fairly accessible, kind of floats between probably a couple different keys, but there's a lot of kind of adventurous outside chord changes that contribute to the darkness of the tune. The melody section for the tune, there's some shifting meter in there too, some 7/4 back and forth with 4/4. So it's kind of an interesting tune with some dark outside changes. So
okay, that's a good intro. Let's listen to Dark Matter now here on Backstage Jazz. This is Backstage Jazz, and my guest today is jazz guitarist Steve Langemo, and we're listening to his new album called Up From the Outside. Got a track up next called Meshagiri. What should we know about this one, Steve?
This one, this is kind of a slow burn into the tune. So be patient. This is kind of one of my little art projects, I guess. So I got the inspiration for this tune from a song by a saxophone player in another group I've played with. It is kind of this very simple, repetitive song that's almost like a drum solo through the entire song. So this song has a fairly simple ostinato bass line, a melody that is cool but repeats with the guitar and saxophone. And maybe the thing in this tune to pay attention to is the drums, because it's this slow build sort of drum solo almost all the way through the tune. So when we were rehearsing the tune, I was telling Stefan, the drummer, just when you think you've played too much, more, give me more. So yeah, it's kind of a funny tune. And then the solo section starts kind of very outside and free, and then locks into sort of a groove that's within a key. But,
okay.
Yeah, the drums are the thing in this tune. Fantastic playing by Stefan Flores.
So put your headphones on. Here's Meshagiri on Backstage Jazz. Listen for the drummer. This is Backstage Jazz. I'm Steve Roby. My guest today is jazz guitarist Steve Langemo. And, let's talk about your upcoming show at Dazzle on Friday, November 24th. Who's going to join you on stage for this show, and what can fans look forward to?
So I've got the drummer that you just heard on those 2 tracks that you played, Stefan Flores. He's fantastic, so people can look forward to some fantastic drumming. I've got a bass player with me that night named Kerwin Brown. And any musician around Denver or the Colorado region would know this guy. He's a kind of front range Denver institution. He's played with everybody. He's been in a lot of killer bands. He's in a fairly popular band right now called Many Colors, that if you haven't checked those guys out, they've got shows all over Denver. Maybe look them up for a show.
Okay.
So Kerwin's great. And then I've got a great keyboard player, Colorado Springs based guy named Ian Ferguson, who I have not played with that much, but played with recently. And I just feel like he is just a great, fun fit.
Okay. Sounds like a great show.
And we'll be doing just largely my original music. So all, a 90-minute show, probably 10 to 12 tunes, either all my original music, or we may, sometimes I'll throw in, an oddly arranged standard, or sometimes I like to do songs by a favorite guitar player. Like I've been playing some Alan Holdsworth tunes. Nobody plays Holdsworth, so I got some guys that come out and see me sometimes that really dig Holdsworth, and you don't get to hear that stuff live much.
Wow, how cool was that? That's right. Before I let you go, Steve, have you got time for a few quick, fun, lightning round questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's have some fun with this. What music are you currently listening to now?
I think the last thing that I was listening to was a fully new Michelle and Cello album called the Omnichord Real Book. And she's kind of I don't even know how to describe her if you don't know her, but she's very, there's a lot of jazz in there. There's a lot of modern sort of hip hop and neo soul. She's a vocalist and bassist. That would be worth checking out. So that was the last thing I listened to. I've been listening to some modern guitar players, Gilad Hexelman, Tim Miller, some other guys too. But
all right.
I guess that wasn't a short answer, was it?
There's no clock here. I don't have any clock. There's no judges.
Okay.
So, and there's no wrong answer.
Great.
What's your all-time favorite album?
Oh man, all-time favorite. Steely Dan, Asia.
Wow.
Would be up there. I'm a huge Steely Dan fan, so that's one of the other things that got me into jazz when I was a kid, and I started listening to Steely Dan, and I really realized, like, wow, this was a rock pop band that had hits, but even if I want to play that music correctly, I got to learn how to play jazz. So
I love that album too.
Steely Dan's Asia was a real big one for me. Probably one of my other all-time favorite records. Not really a jazz record, but not many people would know this. But there was I grew up in North Dakota, Minnesota area, and there was a killer funk band in the '90s based in Minneapolis called Greasy Meal that had some guys from Prince's band in it, and their first record is probably to this day one of my favorite albums. Listened to the most.
You take a deep dive once in a while, don't you? That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
This next question's kind of silly, but what do you sing in the shower or in your car?
Oh man, I'm a terrible singer. I figured out early on. The most singing I've done is a cover band in college where I probably sang, 4 or 5 songs a night to give the good singers a break. And then that went down to, hey, we're cool if you just sing background vocals. And then, I kind of worked my way out of that too. So it's a good thing I got into playing instrumental music and, things like that. So anyway, I'm a terrible singer. So I don't sing in the car or the shower much at all.
Okay. Well, they're private places, and, if you're on the freeway, I kind of have some fun with it too. Or I just pound on the dashboard there as if it were drums. What's your favorite Saturday night record? I know you're probably always gigging on Saturdays, but if you were home and you put some music on Saturday night, what would you listen to?
I gig a lot on Saturdays, but if I have a Saturday off, I have this wonderful partner, Susie is her name. Then it's got to be date night, to make up for the gig nights. So if I'm listening to music on a Saturday night, it might be a musician we go to see or a band we go to see. If we're in the car, we're probably listening to. She's a huge Tool fan, so the Saturday night music might be a Tool record. So, again, not a jazz record, but
no,
yeah.
Not your mellow Marvin Gaye album or something.
Right.
Okay. And what about Sunday morning? Do you got a chill record for Sunday mornings?
I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily seek out chill records. Another album. This is a few years old already, a number of years, but Esperanza Spalding record I've been listening to off and on, called D Plus Evolution, if you're familiar with that record.
Yeah.
It's sort of a guitar, like an electric guitar trio with her on bass and drums. And that's got some really nice tunes. There's a little chaos in there too, which I really like. But yeah, I may put that on this Sunday morning because we've had this conversation.
Okay. Well, thanks for playing along with the fun and silly lightning round questions, but it kind of opens up a few other doors that we don't get to in the regular questions there. I just want to remind our listeners you can catch Steve Langemo and his band on Friday, November 24th at Dazzle for a 9 p.m. show. Doors open at 8, and you can pick up tickets at dazzledenver.com. Thanks for your time today, Steve, and have a great show at Dazzle.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
If you're enjoying the Backstage Jazz Show, we'd love for you to like, subscribe, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And now, back to the show.
The Backstage Jazz Show was recorded at Little Raven Studios in downtown Denver, and our producer was Craig Stevens. You can find Backstage Jazz wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to stop by our website, backstage-jazz.com, where all past and current episodes have been archived. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email us at backstagejazz@fastmail.com. This is Steve Roby. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Backstage Jazz.
You've been listening to the Backstage Jazz Show. Join us next time for more great jazz and interviews with your favorite musicians.